Hello again. So this session is on how to configure list views within Applaud. So this is a continuation of the topic of personalization, but now we're going to look at a slightly more advanced way of displaying data, which is displaying multiple records on the screen at once in a list. So there's an example of the list view. We have seen this view on the absent screen. This is the one we're going to look at as an example. But the general way that list views are configured and personalized is pretty much the same as in the previous topic. We use fast formula. We just have a few extra settings to tell Applaud that we're showing multiple records. And then there's a few other settings to set things like the colors and the icons that are on the screen in front of you. So every row on a list shows one record or one row from the database. So absences here is an example, EITs might be another example, and you can optionally add a color into each row as shown. Now that color out of the box we usually use for the approval status. So we can show transactions pending approval or approved or whatever. Now you don't have to use the color to show approval status. You can use the color for other items. We have some customers that like to highlight rows in red where there's an action for a manager to take, for example, but you are in control of the color and what shows particular colors on each row. On every row there are up to 3 rows of text that you can enter. Actually there's little workarounds to get more than that if you need it, but generally 3 is the recommended approach. So you have a top row, a middle row and a bottom row, and you can choose which data to show in each one of those rows. You don't have to use all 3 rows. On the screen here we've got an example for the pending approval absences. We've got 3 rows with the top row showing approval status. For the ones that are approved down below, we've taken off the top row just to make the user interface cleaner. Just to consider when you are implementing and personalizing for a client, especially if you are doing mobile configuration, that you want to keep this UI nice and clean and tidy. Don't put too much text on, because when you go onto the mobile phone display, if you have too much text it can look a little bit cluttered and a bit untidy. So just keep that in mind when you're configuring yourself. Now if you want to see the detail of a row, you press that little icon there and you see a little pop-up panel. We'll see that soon. And you can also add icons on the screen as well if you want to. We've also introduced some features that you can add HTML images into here as well. We have some sample views that do that. Now in terms of the pop-up, that's what it looks like when you touch on a row. You see a bit more information come through, and this really allows you to just display the summary information on each row in the list, and then leave this pop-up to show other less important information that the user might need. So this is kind of summary information on the list, and then this is detailed information on the pop-up. Okay, so the things you have to define is there's still a summary row at the top that you can configure. This can be sometimes useful if you want to put help text in, for example, or any URLs or anything else. By default, we keep the top the same as what's on the summary list, but you can change that, and I think showing help text is a good use of that if you have help text to display. And then in here we have up to 30 fields that you can show other data from that particular row. Exactly the same way as on a form view, you can only show 30 bits of information too. So we're going to start by looking at views that are read-only, but for certain transactions you can enable the user to add a row or edit an existing row, update or delete as well. And we'll talk about update and delete in the final session in this first series. Right, as you might expect, this is all controlled by fast formula, and basically each item on this list is an attribute in the fast formula. So remember back to the last session when we talked about fast formulas defining item 1, prompt, item 2, HTML, all that sort of thing. There's just some other attributes to set to control things like the color, icons, and so on. So the color is set by an attribute called status color. You set that in the formula, and then we have a number of HTML colors that we support. We have these two variables called transaction type and workflow status. You very rarely would have to change those. We deliver logic out of the box to detect how that transaction is doing, if it's pending, if it's in error, if it's approved. But if you need to do anything a bit more advanced, you can use these items and attributes to determine the colors to show or any other text that you show on the screen. And then finally we have the summary underscore icon is an attribute that sets the icon on the page. Then we have 3 rows of data in the summary, and they're called summary context, summary text, summary message. So basically what you do as a consultant implementing this is you set summary context to be the top level text, summary text to be the middle, and summary message to be the bottom. So you decide which fields should be in each of those 3 rows, and you construct a string in the formula to set each one of those. So if you had a requirement to, instead of showing duration, you might want to show some sort of flex field from absence, or maybe you want to show the absence reason, you can do that. You just have to configure the summary message at the bottom row to pull in your flex field or whatever other field you want to show. This becomes particularly important when we come on to extra information types and special information types, because with those flex field constructs, we as in Applaud have no idea which fields we should display by default, because unlike absence, where we know that the dates are important or the absence types are important, with EITs we don't know, and it's down to you as a consultant to decide what are the important fields to show as an EIT or an SIT in order to get that display looking just right. And that's one of the skills of implementing EITs and SITs in particular, is just to tighten up that display, make it look good. And then finally, here we have again 3 rows in the detail header. We call this the detail header, context, text, message. By default, these things are set to be the same. So by default, detail header context will equal summary context, detail header text will equal summary text. But you can change that. And as I say, quite a nice little change is if you've got lots of help text, maybe set detail header message to be the help text or links to other intranet sites that you want to show. All of these support HTML, so if you want to put some links in or change a little bit about the text, you are able to do that through HTML formatting as well. So the fields in the detail and the pop-up, they're exactly the same as the previous session we did. You set item 1 prompt, you set item 1 HTML, down to number 30 if you've got 30 fields. Just notice that you can combine database columns into a single row on here. So here we've got absence dates. We've actually got 2 database fields in one single Applaud field. So it's quite important. So although you're limited to 30 items in this pop-up, you can actually have multiple database fields within those 30. So you can display a great amount of information if you need to. So here's an example. This is an example of the absence formula that we use. We call it XXASM view absence. Now this is a pretty complicated formula. If you look at the example, this is about the hardest one we have. Lots of processing in here. But generally it's fairly simple if you actually work down the logic. It's actually not too difficult to see what's going on. So for example, here we have the summary message is the absence type, or in this case, if the absence hasn't got a duration, then we show the duration text plus the type. If it hasn't got duration, we just show the absence type. So this summary message, if I just go back one slide, the summary message is the bottom row here, and you see, just get rid of these prompts. So here we've got those 2 examples here. On this one, the duration is set, so we're showing the summary message is duration plus reason or type. On this one, there's no duration, so we're just showing absence type. So the logic that does that is this piece of code here. Then we've got this detail header set to the summary, and then we're just going down item 1, prompt and HTML like before. So the first one is absence type. Notice here what we're doing. If the reason is not set, then the HTML content is the type of absence plus reason, absence reason. Oops. Okay, and you can see that example here on the sick time. And in this one, we've got type slash reason. We've got absence type followed by the absence reason in one single field. Item 2 is the category. Item 3 is the dates. Okay, so very similar to the personalization of a regular employee center view. There's just a few extra things to set. Often on our standard processes like absence and personal information, addresses and phones, you probably won't have to change too much. When you get onto extra information types in particular and special information types, this is something that you need to understand how to do, because you'll always have to be changing the formula to suit your EIT or SIT. And similarly, if you have flex fields that are really important to your customer, that's when you need to understand how to show it on this pop-up, or sometimes show it on this list here. Right, this is a nice short exercise. Give yourself 10 minutes or so, but take your own time. This is really just going through list view configuration. We'll be using the absence one in particular as an example. And normal process, do it in your own time. And I'm going to be pausing the recording and then picking up the answers in a few seconds. So good luck with the exercise. I'll be going through the answers on the recording shortly. Okay, let's go through the answers to this particular exercise on absence and general configuration of view formula. So question 1, what's the view formula in the absence history view and what's the name? So let's go. We probably know the drill by now. First of all, we're going to look at the registered views menu. So I always do this, even now after many years of using Applaud. If a customer asks me to go through and look at their setup, I'll always come here first point of call. So we're going to look at xxreg. This is our registered views menu. Okay, down here we've got absence is here, absence detail, and here is the fast formula name here. Very nice. And in Employee Center, let's get that up at the same time so we can see what it looks like on screen and remind ourselves. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're going to be looking at the formula that is controlling the display of this view of absences. So the formula name you should have had is XXXXAS EMP view ABS LOA view. So let's go and have a look at the contents of that formula. Okay, here it is. Let's press details. And there is the contents of the formula. So we'll look at that for some of the other questions. Okay, what's shown on the top row of the list, summary context. When might you see a red status color? Okay, so the question is what's shown on the top line here. Kind of obvious, I guess. When it's orange, at least it's pending approval. You can see that from the example. Let's have a look at the code that does that in the formula. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier for you to see. Okay. So here you've got lots of inputs. If you've been asking yourself, thinking ahead about, well, how do I know which inputs I can use for the formula and everything else, well, we'll be coming on to that soon. But for now, those are the things you can work with within the formula. And then you can see the question was, what's on the top row? Well, if you remember from the training, the top row was summary context, and the summary context, and that comes up, shows this. Font color is equal to status color plus the status text. And you can see some HTML formatting is going on there to change the color of the font. So we have to kind of work backwards and see, well, what was status color and what status text, where are those coming from? Well, status color we know, that's going to be green, red, whatever. Now, when you come into colors, if you want to define your own colors, you might need a bit of help from a web person, but basically we use HTML colors. So there's some predefined colors that we've got up there, but ask any web coder and they'll be able to help you come up with the 6-digit hex number that represents all the different colors you can usually display on PCs. So there's a few out of the box that are usually enough for approvals at least, but if you need different colors, that's the technique to do it. So first of all, on the top row we're setting the color, and then we're basing the status color. It's based on the workflow status code. So if it's RFC, take a guess what that stands for. If you said return for correction, you're correct. That will show as red. There's a workflow error, deep red. Actually doesn't look too different on the screen. SFL, save for later. We don't support save for later in any of our screens. I suppose I'll make that clear right away. We have other techniques to keep pending transactions on hold. But if you're implementing Applaud and at the time of go live you have users who do have save for later transactions, they will show as grey, and they should basically just clear those in standard Oracle screens, and then they won't appear again. We've got approved is green, and then anything else is coloured amber. And if you actually look even further up, you've also got the status text here. You see the status text is controlled through this bit of logic, which is based on transaction type. So again, pick through this in your own time, but these are basically messages. So if you go into the messages screen, you'll see whatever the message is for emp new and emp updated. When you're doing a brand new row, the status text should say something like pending approval, I think. And if it's an update, it should say sort of pending approval for update, or it's a slightly different wording. Okay, so there's two things there that are set. The status text is set, the status color is set. They're combined with some HTML formatting to construct that top row. What determines the icon to show, and how do you know what to set for the icon name? Quite straightforward, this one. So if you keep scrolling down, you should see some summary icon here. And basically you can see that the summary icon is being set based on the absence type. Okay, so again, quite nice. I quite like the baby one if you've got maternity, but here we've got, say, family leave or parent leave. If the absence type has that, then we'll see the icon for parent. You can see that hopefully on here. I think there's a few we've got that set. Let's have a look. No, it doesn't look like I have, unfortunately. But we've got things like the sickness here has got the little cross, the brief suitcase for vacation. Don't think we've got any other examples on this particular setup. Now, where does the icon come from? It comes from the icon bank, which we've discussed early on. Same icons as you have here. You can see on the icon bank option here. So you can pick from any of these particular icons that we deliver out of the box, and as I say, we're delivering these all the time. There's the baby one for maternity. Okay, next one, next question. This is a good one. What do you think the P attributes are for? So if you look through the formula, you'll see things like a lot of the attributes repeated. You've got date start, you've got date start P, you've got date end, you've got date end P, time start P, time start, and so on. When we go down, we have this sort of section here where we're setting start date to start date P. So look here, we've got two branches of logic here. Start date equals date start P, start date equals just date start without the P, and the switch on that block is the transaction type. is the transaction type insert? In other words, is it pending approval? And there's your answer basically. This is based on whether the transaction is pending approval or not. So worth just pausing on this because it's quite important. If you know your Oracle architecture well, then you will know that when you submit a process for approval, it will sit within the transaction table, and that's a separate table to where it sits when the approval comes in. So if, for example, we go into here, let's just go back to our screen. So in these ones that are coloured orange, those are sitting there pending approval. Those on the database sit in the HR API transaction tables, and all child tables of that. Whereas when they're approved, they sit in the per absence attendances table. So the data source for these two different rows is different. This is coming from a different table than that. And this is where the underscore P values come in. The underscore P values are the values that are pending approval, and the ones without the underscore P are items that are approved. Where it gets useful to separate the two is if you make an update, because this then allows us to see what the value is that's been updated and what the proposed new value is. So that comes in quite useful on processes like change of personal information. If you're changing something like the name, your name, you can see on the screen, you can actually configure it on screen to show what was the first value, what's the new value, using the underscore P's. Okay, so it's very important to take that into consideration. Same underscore P variables you'll see throughout Employee Centre, within the personal information screen, within the ITs, everywhere. Everywhere that we support approvals, you'll see underscore P variables. Inspecting and displaying the logic used to display the third line on each row in the absence history. Right, so the third line in the absence history is this one. Kind of covered this in the preceding slides, but we'll do it again. So if you remember, the third line is summary detail. Summary message. And that's actually in this bit of section here. You can see summary message is set. So basically it's saying, is a duration set? Does the absence have a day's value or an hour's value? If it's no, then just show the absence type on the bottom row. If one of those is true, then actually show the duration, put a colon in the middle, and then show the absence type. Right, and that's what you see here. So for actually, we haven't got a good example. This is maybe an example here, where because it's an open-ended sickness, we haven't actually got a duration yet. So we're just showing sick time. When the end date comes in, you'll get a duration, and it will show. I think all of it. Oh, here's one here that hasn't got a duration. Just a single day vacation. We're not seeing the duration on there. When you click on the detail, it's saying not specified. All right. A new flex field is introduced to the absence entry. Attribute 7 needs to be shown in the pop-up. What needs to be changed? So the question here reflecting a typical requirement for a customer. They want you to change Applaud configuration so you can see the flex fields that are attached to that absence. So if I sort of click on a typical row here, you can see there's no flex fields showing at all. How do you change that? Basically the same as before. In terms of the pop-up, you would introduce a new item 5. Item 5 prompt, which equals whatever the name of the flex field column is. Item 5 HTML will be the name of the column. So for example, attribute 7, whatever the name of the column is, you would also have to pass it in here as an input, so the formula knows about it. You'd also have to set a default because it would be an input. You'd use the same column name, by the way, to pass that in, and then you'd return it at the end as item 5 prompt, item 5 HTML. All right, so fairly straightforward. So in a later topic, we'll cover how exactly you know what inputs are available to you and what they should be called. But for now, just take my word for it that normally it's the name of the database column is the input you use. Final in this section, and it kind of comes on to the next topic. Can you find the logic that controls if you can update or delete an absence? Absences is one of the ones where lots of customers have varying requirements on the ability to edit or update absences. And actually we've got some really nice facilities here for you to really put some good logic to control whether you can update, delete an absence or not. So you see we've got an add up the top, and on here we've got an edit, but we haven't got a delete. Not quite sure we haven't got any examples of delete, but you can make this read only. You could control when the update is shown. You can control when the delete is shown. It's going to come into discussion in the next session, but basically very, very simple here. We've got update allowed equals yes, delete allowed equals no. So it's basically saying I can always I can always update every absence. I can never delete an absence. In reality, you'd probably have to write some conditions in there to make that yes or no choice a little bit more intelligent. But simplest, that's all we're doing. We're just saying a yes or no flag, and that controls whether you see the delete button or the edit button. Then, of course, those flags are then returned in the formula. Very nice. Okay, that was quite a nice short session. The final piece of this first suite is going to be talking about how we configure edits. So configuring what happens when you update a row. Now can control the update and delete a little bit more. Okay, thanks. That's the end of this session. One more in this first suite on personalization to go.